This is John Nugent.
I'm Ron Peters.
And I'm Sam Long.
Welcome to the After Class Podcast.
Because the best conversations happen
After class. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the After Class Podcast. We're glad to have you along. If you're tuning in to continue our First Peter series, I'm just going to let you know that's not what this episode is about. Every once in a while, we break into what we're doing with a pretty hot topic, and the events of this past week, I think, fall under that category. Charlie Kirk, who is a political, I'm not sure what the definition of what he is. Activist, thank you, was shot and killed. And so we thought him being a Christian and being a public figure and being an influence in various Christian circles, we thought it would be appropriate to talk about that, talk about him, talk about the sort of the aftermath of all that. And so that's what this episode is going to be about.
Yeah. And so people, I think, have already asked us questions about it, like directly to us. Hey, are you guys going to have a conversation about this? And, you know, we don't necessarily want to jump in on every hot topic that comes along, but I think this is really important because he wasn't just a political activist, but he was a very outspoken follower of Jesus. And that's important to us because we've lost a brother. Whatever you feel like your connection with him may or may not be, we lost a brother, and it's important for us to talk about, and especially because he was such a important national figure and well-known. It's hard to we can't just walk by it. We've got to have a conversation about it. And I think that we have a lot of listeners who are curious to see how we would respond. So it's okay to take a break from 1 Peter and talk about this.
Yeah, and we don't have a lot of unique insights, like takes on. We don't have insider information.
Right.
Well, there's a little bit of insider information that I'll leak out a little bit later, but we don't come as if like, oh man, ACP has this profound take on it, and we really don't want to have a take on it, in the sense of, hey, a prominent person, has been murdered and ACP's drawn attention to themselves because of it.
Right.
So it's hard to even want to talk about it. We don't want it to be about us. But what we are about as a podcast is learning how to think Christianly, to process things from a distinctly Christian point of view. Like, should our Christianity change how we view this situation? And that's the topic that fascinates us. So we're not going to do a deep dive into Charlie Kirk, the nature of his passion, his activism, his ministry, his witness, his faith commitments, his political alliances. We're not really getting into that. But we do want to talk about, there's something big that a ton of people are talking about. In what ways should Christians stand out in how they talk about it? And so it's more of like a reminder to all of us not to conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. How can we just remind ourselves to approach this like Christians? And that we feel like might be a helpful episode to have. Having said that, maybe I'll kick off by saying, or start our conversation by saying, what are some ways other thing I want to say.
I know. Shifting gears.
It seems part of me feels bad. Like we're dedicating an episode to Charlie Kirk when there was a recent school shooting and a bunch of people have died and a bunch of young people. Like, why does him dying get an episode and not that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that?
No, that's a really good question, because you're right. There have been other horrific tragedies that we didn't stop to talk about, didn't interrupt a series or anything like that. But I think that one of the reasons this stands out is because he was such an outspoken Christian. And that informed what he did. And he didn't try to hide that. Like, he put that out there. I am a follower of Jesus. And in his way of thinking, this is what being a follower of Jesus looks like. And he was really, really bold with that. And he wanted to be the kind of figure that would inspire and transform and do those kinds of things. And so I think that so many Christians naturally have gravitated toward him. I'm embarrassed to say that when I heard about it, I was like, okay, who is this? Like, I didn't know who he was, and I'm just putting that out there. I didn't follow him. I wasn't big into his movement, and so I had to get myself a little bit up to speed. Okay, who was Charlie Kirk? Like, I'd heard his name before, but I had to get myself up to speed. But one of the very first things that was very, very obvious is that everything grew out of what he understood being a follower of Jesus was all about. And that was his foundation. So I think that is a big part of it. When these other tragedies happen, of course we care. It's not like we're indifferent to it. But when somebody who shares our love for Jesus suddenly meets this kind of a tragic end, it hits us in a way that the other things don't quite do. So I think that's part of the answer. I'm sure there's other things that people can bring up, but that's one of the first things that comes to my mind.
Yeah, it's not as though his life and or death is worth more value than anyone else who has died, but his influence was far greater, and his impact in the world, for good or for ill, was greater. And so this is one of those potentially kind of watershed moments in American history. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out, but
right,
it's a pretty large deal because of his popularity, because of his influence, because of his polarizing nature. And so for me, that's would be a reason to talk about it as opposed to other tragedies that are taking place.
Yeah. I just think it's important for that disclaimer. Right?
Yeah.
In having upset at him, we're not saying he is more important,
right?
Because I don't think he is. And who would have known the influence of the people whose lives were taken, who never got to develop into something that might have been more influential than Charlie Kirk, right? So his life is not more influential, but his life's work intersects with the topic of this podcast, which is how to think Christianly in the world out of a biblical framework. And he was attempting to do that, and he got gunned down in the process of doing that thing. That's why we're talking about him, and why we don't talk about every tragedy that comes along. It's because, frankly, on other tragedies, we don't have anything to add to what's already been said. And we don't just like to hear ourselves talk. We like to try to contribute something. And we think we might be able to contribute here in a way that other episodes, we just feel like, I just have nothing to add but to be sad with everyone else, and to mourn and grieve and keep on championing a different vision of life that would make those things less common, and certainly less common among Christians. But as I don't know, as we've been wrestling with this, even as I say, this is more relevant to the topic of our regular podcast is because of the distinct Christian, perhaps, angle that we could take toward this. We kind of wrestled with, is there a distinct Christian take on his shooting that just like good-natured humans in this world who are not jerks or blind partisans, like, our belief in total depravity in a non-Calvinist version, we're all broken and screwed up, right? But some more than others. And maybe that's not even true. I retract. Some are less visibly annoying to other people and harmful to other people than others. But there are good people in this world who are saying some things about how to respond and not to respond to Charlie Kirk that sound very Christian.
Right.
Right. So what are some of the things that I guess we should be responding as Christians that other people who don't have faith in Jesus Christ are also responding in that way?
Yeah. Well, to your point, in a way, it kind of does speak to the way that the Christian message has made its way into our society. That so many people on different sides, politically and socially, are saying this is wrong. Violence is not an answer. They're condemning this violent act. A lot of them are not Christians, but they're saying this kind of violence is unacceptable in our society, and we should not condone it. We should rightfully condemn it. I'm like, that kind of shows you that people are thinking in Christian ways that they probably don't want to admit are Christian ways. Like, they don't realize the fact that that's something that grows directly out of the message that Jesus preached. And I would like them to acknowledge God and to acknowledge Jesus and his lordship. But I'm happy to see that gospel message has gotten out there in a way that there are exceptions, obviously, people who are being jerks about it. But so many people on both sides are saying, agree or disagree, this is unacceptable and we shouldn't go down this route. I'm encouraged by that, to see that you can deny the source of your thinking on that, but this is something that comes straight from God, mediated to us through Jesus. And I'm glad we're living in a society that has embraced that. I wish they'd embrace, the messenger, but at least that message is getting out there. So I just want to put out that there's something to that I am encouraged by.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of conservatives are focusing on those on the other side who outspoken, saying, "Oh, he got what he deserved." But there are an overwhelming number of those who were not supporters of Charlie, who are like, they say this is unacceptable and we should not celebrate that. And yeah, we would agree that this, like, someone has died, a father is dead, a husband is dead, a person is dead, and celebrating that, that's an awful reaction to it. And so I've been actually encouraged by the number of people who are saying this is not okay, who were not fans of him. And I think that offsets it's a vocal minority that are like, yes, we're happy that this happened. And so that's a reaction that I think we all embraced. This is not okay. We should not celebrate it.
Yeah. So as Christians, we don't celebrate it. We condemn it. And there are a lot of non-Christians who, for their own reasons, don't celebrate it and condemn it.
Right.
So that's not something new.
No.
And then we can talk about how our reason comes from a different place, maybe than
Right.
theirs. Like, maybe there are some other public figures who condemn it and say, no, political violence is always wrong because they're politically active and they don't want people shooting them.
Sure.
So their motive could be self-preservation.
A little bit of that,
if
sure.
the shooting, if shooting people like Charlie Kirk increases in number, then there's going to be equal number of people on the left to start getting shot. And so that's not necessarily a Christian motivation, but Christians would agree with them that it's unacceptable, it needs to be condemned. And I'm like you, I have to be told by people that there are people who are celebrating it.
Right.
Because people like that have been expunged from my feed such a long time ago. I just never see those kind of extremist views. But maybe one thing that Christians might do uniquely is not give more visibility to, that vocal minority.
Right.
Than, giving visibility to them adds fuel to the partisanship and the bickering between sides. So we might mute those voices rather than amplify them.
Right.
Agree. Yeah, agree.
I also say another thing that I think we share in common with the world is like not retaliating. There's I don't want to get too far afield, but it's kind of what you're saying, where the side that is pro-gun just got attacked, and they're the ones with all the guns, and so like there's nervousness about what will be next. You take one of our guys, we'll take one of yours, right? What's that old saying? You put one of my guys in the hospital, I put one of yours in the morgue. Like
Right,
that,
yeah.
that's not okay. And yet there's some sentiments about that going out. And so both sides are hopefully saying, let's not retaliate. And of course, as Christians, we're for that too, right? We're turn the other cheek, ideally. And so I think that's another thing that we share with many in the world.
And so to that point, like building on that, I think that a Christian response is to look for ways to de-escalate. There are going to be people who are going to want to blow this up for political, cultural, social reasons. Like it's going to work to their agenda. And even politicians on both sides who are saying this is horrible, this never should happen, we do not condone it. There's still going to be people, those same people are going to look for ways to use this to their own advantage. And I think a Christian response is to step away from that and say, I'm not going to use this for my own advantage. This is a horrible thing, and there's nothing good that can come out of this. And I can't twist this in some way that I'm now going to get an advantage out of it. And so a uniquely Christian response, I think, is to just step away from it and say, I want no part of this. I grieve with this wife who lost her husband, these kids who lost their father. I grieve with them. I will not use it in any way. And I think that is in many ways, a uniquely Christian response.
Yeah, and there's grieving with the people. I mean, his ministry was to college students.
Yeah.
And us, this is another dog in this fight that's kind of personal to us. Like, we exist to educate college students. Like, that age, we recognize, the vulnerability of that age, the promise of that age, the growth, transformation, the worldview building at this stage. And we're about shaping people at this phase to be servant leaders for the church and world, right? Informed with a gospel kingdom vision. And his ministry was that too, not in the classroom, but in the halls. And so he is the one who, for the first time helped certain college students to think that they could be proud of their Christian faith in public, or who, for the first time, were awakened to politics can be interesting and worthy of conversation. Like that. Some people turn on to that in their college years, and they've been totally disengaged all throughout high school. And then he could have been the one that turned the light bulb and awakened a passion about that, whether you think that's a good passion or not.
Right.
He was a light bulb moment for someone. And for some people, and Great Lakes actually has a student who was an acquaintance of Charlie Kirk, had conversations with him on multiple occasions. And Charlie Kirk was the one for him that made him less partisan.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, his impact on you depends on where you were. And this particular student expressed that he was on the far right, and it was Charlie who made him less critical, more prone to listen to people from the other side, to more take seriously the other position than this person had done previously. Now, someone on the far left would experience Charlie in a totally different way.
Right. Yeah.
But his impact on this student was to move him closer to the left, not further away. So anyway, so I think there are people for whom, and we had professors or maybe mentors at church who were like the person who activated us as an adult thinker and gave us agency as a thinker. And he was that for a lot of people. And there are a lot of people who are not family members for whom he was a role model, a mentor, a guide for them, who are also grieving.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Right. And so it's tricky. And conversely, there are people that, attend those rallies that, he was an agitator who made them loathe him and push them further away from what Charlie stands for. So for whether that's the Christian faith or a certain version of American political process. So yeah, I think Christians not politicizing it, using it to leverage, that's something that's unique about us, but it's also something that non-Christians are saying right now. Don't benefit from this guy's death. That should be a common human view that we would kind of agree with. I think maybe one thing, and again, I wouldn't say it's necessarily Christian. We talk about, don't retaliate in the form of, all right, who on the other side needs to go now? But that goes a little further to what might be a Christian view is don't retaliate against the person who shot him. Yeah. That might be a distinctly Christian view. Like that guy deserves to die, and to wish for his blood to be shed and to wish for vengeance. There's some biblical stuff that would push away from that, right? You think about Cain who, murdered Abel, and then, when God banishes Cain and makes him a wanderer, he says, but people are going to want to kill me because I killed someone. Like the mob is going to want my head. They're going to want capital punishment. And God's response is to protect Cain. So it might be Christian to take non-retaliation that one step further. Not only do not settle the score, and one person from one side, one person must go from the other side, but let's break that cycle altogether. Not by letting this guy walk free, but by not assuming that a blood sacrifice is necessary to settle the score. There might be some different Christians, but Christians are in different places about capital punishment. And so I would say it's a viable Christian response to say, yeah, even think about your gut there and what your impulses are there.
Yeah, it's that, lex talionis, eye for an eye, which it was never a demand, it was a limitation. You don't go beyond this, but many people take it as a demand that if you kill one of ours, you have to die. And the Bible really pushes back against that. And the idea of forgiveness, forgiveness of even huge debts is a part of our DNA. And I'm not saying that's emotionally easy. I'm not trying to say that people can be robots and you just do it. When your emotions get involved, and especially in a situation like this, where your emotions are running high, it's difficult to say, I know how my emotions are telling me to feel on this. And those are real. Those are coming from a perfectly legitimate place. But to say, I want to let Jesus' teaching come in here and transform my thinking on this. And to be able to say, I do not like what you did, and I am angry over what you did, but I want God's word and his spirit to work inside of me to condition my response. I want people to know that's going to be hard, but I also know that it's what God wants us to do. And just encourage people, pray about it, seek God, seek his strength to find the ability to respond maybe differently than just a raw, like open nerve would want to do.
Yeah. And so it becomes easy, I think, for the topic. Again, it can be politicized and turned into, people who have an agenda about gun violence. Let's make this all about that. People who have an agenda about, Christians and politics. Make this all about that. People have an agenda about the death penalty and make it about that. And I think there's some wise counsel, in the unbelieving world and among believers to say, that's not what you do with death. And but at the same time, incidents like this add up to be a pattern that needs to be dealt with and needs to be engaged conceptually. Maybe not in the moment of the aftermath is the time to quick go after it, go for the jugular of the opposite side. See, if only there were tighter gun laws, or see if only, but this is going to become part of the argument. It's going to become another anecdote. But it shouldn't be one this week.
Right.
I think. And it shouldn't be one in isolation. It should be one in the context of a wider set of data. And it's that wider set of data that should really govern that conversation. And for Christians, the wider theological convictions, right, and the full testimony of scriptures that should guide our conversation. We should resist the impulse to make this, the fulcrum, the turning point, the event that, helps us advance our wider argument or agenda about a particular topic. Anything else that the world's saying that we should or should not do that Christians should be probably in widespread agreement with?
Maybe I don't think of anything.
Yeah, I think we've hit the high points for the moment.
Yeah, and maybe a summary statement might be, we shouldn't add to the problem, but strive to be part of the solution. Right. And I think there are Christians and believers and unbelievers who are saying that, and that should always be the Christian response. So the question then is, how do we really approach this uniquely as Christians when, probably the best set of responses unbelievers are saying on the left and on the right and politically unaffiliated? And one thing we thought we could do with this podcast is at least give each of us a Bible verse, a proverb that might remind us, in the moment when someone is trying to draw you into a conversation about this, and they maybe want to politicize it, they maybe want to do something else with it. What is a gut check you can do? What is a proverb you can cite to yourself to remind you how to respond and not to respond, how to get sucked in or not get sucked in? And so we thought of James chapter 1, verse 19, which we've done a whole series on James, and it's an interesting proverb that in really cool ways sets a structure for the book. But the proverb is, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And we thought that is just a great, easy to remember proverb that should guide how we encounter conversations about Charlie Kirk's death, guided by the scriptures, that captures kind of a holistic approach of how we might respond. So we're just going to hit each of those. What might it mean to be quick to listen during times like this?
I think there's listening that needs to be had on both sides. That there's some people that are very sad about this, and like you said, he was a mentor to people. You may not like that, but that's a reality, and so they're grieving. It's not just family, but he had a wide range of people who listened to him, and you said were impacted in pretty positive ways. And so just because someone is really sad about this doesn't mean we look down like that guy or like they're dealing with something. And so we need to like listen to what they're saying about the impact that this person had on them, and not be too judgy about it.
Yeah, it's funny because when I think of being quick to listen, it's really something that we try as educators in a college environment to train our students to do. Because so often, whatever situation we find ourselves in, we assume we know what's going on. We assume we know the motives. We assume we know, whatever series of events sort of led to this particular event. And we don't realize how much we don't know. And one of the things that we're supposed to be learning through this process is humility, to say, here's everything I know, but what don't I know? And once I know that, is it going to change the way I think? And being quick to listen is that ability to say, I want to find out what I don't know. And so when a person is grieving and they're sad, to just listen and say, why are you sad? What's so sad? Because whatever I think about this situation, that person's own experience with it is going to transform it. Another person who's angry, or even that person who's like, that guy got what he deserved. Like, I disagree with that. I don't think anybody deserves violence, but talk to me. Tell me why you think that. Like, you're going to encounter a lot of different people who are going to respond to this in a lot of different ways. And being willing to listen treats them all the same. And I think that that's a very godly way to approach it. And even the worst examples, ones that we definitely don't agree with, giving them that space to voice. And then hopefully by your humility in that, that person who kind of vents is like, this guy just got what he deserved, and they like just spill everything that they want to say. At the end, if they're like, so what do you think about it? By being willing to listen and showing that humility and giving them that space, at least in some situations, that might create space that you wouldn't have already had to say, I understand why you think that way. From your point of view, that makes sense, but here's what I'd like to add to that conversation. So there are just so many great things about that willingness to listen that I think are really, really important.
Yeah. It makes me think of the lament psalms. Like sometimes, psalmists say some things that are pretty raw, pretty emotional, not theologically orthodox, right? Yeah. Not ethically orthodox. And, God encourages us by preserving these psalms in our canon to give each other space to feel and to react and to emote and to verbalize. And being quick to listen just means, we might be gracious to give people space to say their ugly thoughts without immediately judging them, debating them, arguing them, talking them down. Like, allow people to work through it verbally, right? By listening and trying to hear, because in every person's visceral response, if there is a visceral response, there's a backstory to this. Exactly. And it might be very personal to their life. Maybe someone in their family suffered gun violence. Maybe someone in their family was deeply hurt by a policy that, Charlie stood behind, right? And advanced. Like, there's a core thing in there. And if we would take the time to listen to people emoting from the left or from the right or in a nonpartisan way, giving them that space really could open up opportunities to be part of the solution, right? There may be some necessary reframing that our lack of just reacting with our own opinion right away, shutting them down because you can't say that or you can't think that. It's like, actually, people can say that. Maybe you shouldn't be saying that online. Maybe you shouldn't be saying that on Facebook. Maybe you shouldn't be saying that at a cafeteria full of other people, or in front of the classroom, or whatever. But giving people the space to say it in a safe place can really open up room for healing and room for growth and receptivity to learning new things that might make them part of the solution. And if they just keep these feelings bottled up inside, they might become a future part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, yeah. Anything else quick to listen? This is how, yesterday at the cafeteria table, I sat with a student that I didn't know very well, and he expressed, we were just talking about, hey, how was your week? And, he mentioned having lost someone close to him yesterday. And I'm like, yeah, tell me about that. And it ended up being Charlie Kirk. This was the student who actually knew him.
Oh, right.
And I just listened to his story, and I learned things about the student that I didn't know, and I learned things about Charlie Kirk I didn't know. For instance, Charlie Kirk is the reason that this student came to Great Lakes.
Yeah, what an amazing story. I had no idea.
I had no idea. He was in a conversation. He was waffling between Hillsdale and Great Lakes, and Charlie gave him the advice, you visited both places. Where did it feel like home? Where did it feel like you belong there? And the student said, Great Lakes. And he's like, well, that's where you should go then. He actually recruited a student for us, probably knowing nothing about us.
Right, yeah.
Maybe if he did, he wouldn't have. But
right.
But I learned a lot about that student, and I learned a lot about Charlie Kirk in that conversation, because I have dabbled in Charlie Kirk stuff because I care about how Christians are representing Christians in public. And so I've probably watched, 10 to 15 videos over the years, enough to get a sense of things. And, what I learned from this student, his impact on the student was to make him more open to listening to people with different viewpoints. That's what he got out of Charlie Kirk. I would not have gotten that just by watching the videos that I watched. I certainly didn't watch the Charlie Kirk canon of videos. Right,
right, yeah.
But the ones I didn't give me that impression that was a big part of his work. Right. And I learned a little bit by listening, and that helps me understand, there's maybe other people for whom he's had that impact. So, yeah. And you were saying something before we started recording, Ron, or maybe after, about, gentleness.
Oh, right.
Gentleness being one of those spiritual fruit that should characterize believers. And I think this listening posture and gentleness go hand in hand in a way that is distinctly Christian.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit, Galatians 5. But it goes back to what, Matthew says about Jesus, quoting Isaiah, that, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. That there is such a level of gentleness to Jesus that things that are so delicate, he's not going to disturb them. And I've always been challenged by that, because historically I've not been a gentle person. I've always been the exact opposite of that. And a series of separate events all came together to drive that point home, that gentleness is what defines Jesus. And I think you're right. It does tie into that willingness to listen. That it's not about me getting my thing out there. And I think so many people, when they get into conversations, they're just, I got to get my position out there. And it's that kind of drive that's motivating them. And when you embrace listening and when you embrace gentleness, you're just like, I want to create space for other people. You let them talk, you ask them questions. Tell me more about that. Help me to understand this better. And sometimes they'll create space for you. Sometimes they won't. But that gentle spirit says, I don't got to put my thing out there. Unless God creates an opportunity for me, and then I'll seize it. I'm not going to force it into happening. And I just, like I said, it was transformative to me. I'm not saying that I do it all the time. I'm always good at it, but I know I'm better than I was 10 years ago. And I want God to continue to develop that trait inside of me.
Yeah. That transitions nicely to the slow to speak,
Sure.
The next part, right? Being slow to speak. And, this slow to speak may be harder than the quick to listen for some people, because, man, something big and controversial and talk-worthy happened. if I want to be relevant, I have to get my word in. I have to put my frame on it. I have to speak. I have to articulate my position. Why is the wisdom to be slow to speak particularly helpful in a situation like this? Sam.
I would say because you can lose your job. I mean, I say that sort of flippantly, but a lot of people came out very quickly and have lost their jobs apparently in the aftermath.
We
it's
actually
like
have
a day
seen
later.
that. Yeah.
But for Christians,
Not at Great Lakes.
Because because for one, you don't know everything, right? If you haven't listened, you don't know where people are coming from. You don't have all the information at hand, and you're just spouting off. And a lot of times we speak from emotion, and as we talk about, it's okay to say things, but there are platforms that you should and should not. Facebook and Twitter, I don't think is one. If you just like are spouting things off, having not had all the information, had not time to process it. You can talk to your friends. You should. Like, that's part of what we just said. But this idea that I need to get my voice out there to be heard, there's so much we don't know. There's so many people we don't know, and it's just a bad idea, and it shows a lack of grace to people. As I'm talking as Christians, the world does what the world does, but as Christians, like, you're going out, you're saying this, you could definitely be offending or hurting a brother or sister. And have you taken that into consideration? Does that matter to you, or does your voice being heard matter more? And so it's an arrogant posture to say I've got to get something out there without thinking of your brother or sister first.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, the way you framed that. It's tough for people who are educators. Like our entire job is to speak, and we're preachers, so we don't do it just here at the college. Like, our lives are built around talking. And so for us especially to be able to step out of that. But I think it ties into what you were saying there, Sam, that when we want to be quick to speak, we're thinking about ourselves. But if you're thinking about other people, you want to be quick to listen. So that means you want to be slow to speak. I mean, those two tie together. I'm going to create that space for you. So as much as I may want to, there's this part of me that's like, oh, I got to get this point in there, or I've got to challenge this point or support that point, that we might have to resist some of those self-centered urges to speak, because that still is how we create the space for other people. And again, there's a humility to that. Do I think that I am so great that I got to get my points out there, or am I humble enough to say, you know what? I might believe in my points, but I'm not going to be so arrogant as to think I got to get them out there. So those are just some thoughts coming in.
Yeah, and the fact that this proverb comes from the book of James brings another dimension to the slow to speak. I mean, when you get to the section of James that's about slow speech, the emphasis of that chapter, chapter 3, is because words are really powerful.
Yeah.
And not many should be teachers. Not many should be influencers. Not many should be thought leaders. And the ones who are speaking first about this aren't just sharing their opinion and not just failing to listen to others and not just speaking before they have all the facts. They are creating the reality of what happened, right? I truly believe in the linguistic construction of reality. Like, how people talk about things totally shapes how people perceive and experience things. The words create the meaning and the frame and the worldview on something. And so, as an example with this, like, if you're first to speak and someone's going to have to label this. What happened that day? Was it a random drive-by shooting? If it was, that would totally change how things are talked about, right? Was it just a lunatic got loose in a crowd with a gun? Well, that would change how we frame it, right? Now, those don't seem realistic at all, given the few facts we have. But there are at least 3 frames I've heard people use, and by calling them these things, they are creating the reality of what happened. And so one thing people have called it with their words is a political assassination. And automatically that conjures up storylines, plot lines, other people who are involved or might be involved. Some people are calling it a hate crime, right? Which then just makes it a different kind of maybe cultural war issue that is what this is all about. And others are framing it as religious persecution, right? Or even martyrdom, Christian martyrdom. Now, each three of those labels frame the conversation in a totally different way, and they bring about a reality that may not be real, may not be what was actual, may not be what happened, may not be what it is all about. And again, it's another way of conforming what happened to our prior agenda and making it serve us, using this as good fodder for our personal agenda, whatever it may be, which is probably the cruelest thing you can do, and perhaps one of the most dangerous things you can do. And so these labels are starting to be applied. I don't know, what do you guys see at stake in this? Where are they coming from, and what purpose are they serving?
I think that, because I've seen the same thing. I've seen people try to jump in and immediately try to use those labels. And I think a lot of it is because people want to seize control of this so that they can use it towards their own objectives. And so we can't get rid of them. We live in a broken world with people with broken motivations. And so there are just going to be so many people out there for a wide variety of reasons who are going to want to take this event and use it to achieve their own goal. They're not thinking about Charlie or his family or the people or anything like that. They just are like, I can make a lot of hay with this, and I'm going to do it. It's very selfish. It's certainly, in my estimation, not godly. But that's what they're going to do. And I think that for us as Christians, we have to resist that, to say, I'm not going to play that game. You can get into that, but I won't. I won't do it, because that's not God's game, and I'm not going to play your game.
Yeah. And if you're going to speak quick and you speak loud and give it a label, you are being influential, because words are powerful, and you are creating reality. And if it turns out when the investigation is done, we actually know that it was one of these three and not the other two, and yet we've kind of thrown all our chips in one of the ones that it's not, we have created a powerful reality that's impacting other people's lives, that is doing work in their mindset, in their worldview, in their relationships with others, because each of these labels creates us and them. Right? And you've just put this person you've influenced against a them based on false information. And so just realizing words are powerful. Your categories and your labels do work well beyond the 3 seconds you use to say them. And you got to own that responsibility and maybe observe the self-control not to label it when you really don't know.
Yeah, I think our world is like, we all are suffering from a persecution complex where everyone's out to get us, no matter who you are and what you're doing. And so they're using this as, see, I told you so. They're out to get us. Whoever they and whoever us is, it's happening. And so if you're religious, like, see, I told you Christians are being persecuted. You didn't believe me. Here it is. Oh, I told you that the left's trying to destroy the right. And so these different groups are using it, and it's like you said, they're using it to their advantage, and that's not what this is about for us, right? And yet, I don't know. I get very frustrated, slow to anger. I'm not quite there yet. I know that's the next one, but yeah, it's just you're right. It's creating a narrative, which then creates a reality that may not actually be true, and that's not okay. And so the slow to speak, the quick to listen, slow to speak, like, allow things to come out for what they are, and then we can have that conversation. If it is one of those, okay, what are the implications to that? But we're not there yet.
Yeah, and I agree. It's that idea of perception, that you're creating a way of looking at this, and now that's your definition, that's your perception. But to your point, John, you made a great point. It may not be the reality. Like that, this person's motivations, we have no idea what his motivations were. And I'll admit, I'm really curious. I'm just this huge why person. I want to know why he did it, what he thought he would accomplish, all that kind of stuff. I'm fascinated by those questions. And as soon as you start labeling it, there are people who won't be able to break away. It doesn't matter what the motivations are. Their perception of the situation is going to be dominated by, this person was a nutcase, or he hated Christians, or he was whatever. And they won't be able to break away from it. And so I don't want to contribute to that. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to wait and I'm going to listen. I'm going to find out at least as much as I can as it's mediated to us about this person and his motivations or whatever, assuming that the person who's in custody right now is the person who did it, because we haven't even, made that determination yet. We're recording this on Friday, so y'all are going to hear this on Monday and later. So
a lot will change probably.
Yeah, by the time you're actually listening to this, there are going to be things that we know that we don't know at the moment. But that's another reason to just step back and say, I'm going to admit to what I don't know. And I don't want to be part of the problem of creating a narrative that's going to be disproven later. But, once it's out there, you can't stop it from moving.
Yeah, and that was James's point.
Yep.
I feel like the last one, slow to anger, we've kind of talked about.
Yeah, it's
and that's
part of it.
what the world's been saying. Don't quickly retaliate. Don't quickly use this. Don't make the problem worse. Don't seek revenge. Don't harbor all these bitter feelings that eat you up and make you mean to other people. So we're not going to go into detail about that one, especially because I think we want to end with what for us is, and again, even that, right, slow to speak, slow to anger, quick to listen. You could say that's something we share with unbelievers. Like, this is conventional wisdom that everyone can live by and that people, even without faith, are living by. Maybe the one thing that it makes a Christian response the most Christian is what we find in John 13:35, which is, they will know we are Christians by our love for one another, right? And this is talking about love of believers for fellow believers. There's a kinship. There is a family there. There is no doubt. There are a lot of people who may disagree with whether Charlie was a kind of Christian that they want to be, or whether they thought his approach to politics or debate or public presence is Christian in a way that they would approve or not approve. But there should be no doubt he was a sincere believer, Jesus follower, tried to live out his faith with integrity, the best he understood it, which means he is a brother in Christ. And we are called to love our brothers and sisters in Christ in a way above and beyond our love for all of our neighbors, right? We prioritize fellow believers because we're in this kingdom mission together. And so how does this call for love, how should that impact the Christian response to the death of Charlie Kirk?
For me, it's we kind of mentioned earlier, but it's an added layer of grace. I have seen quite a few of his videos. There are a lot of things I don't agree with him on. That's okay. There are a lot of things I don't, with a lot of Christians, agree on, and he just happened to be more well known about those views. But like you said, he still is a brother in Christ, that we have lost a brother in Christ. And so for me, it's about extending grace regardless of those views that I really cringe at. Really, he still loved Jesus. He still accepted Christ as Savior, was very vocal about that. And now he's gone. And so I need to have an extra layer of grace and show love, whatever that looks like. Love to people who do agree with him on certain things, whatever that love looks like. Because the world is easy to say, okay, we feel bad we lost this person. That's not necessarily love. That's just, I guess, compassion. And so love is going beyond and is doing things to try to bring about reconciliation and all the rest. So that's the challenge, I think, to me, because like I said, I'm in the camp of oh my gosh, I would listen to these things, just sometimes even appalled. So I need to understand, he still loved Jesus and he still accepted Christ. He's part of the kingdom. And so be more gracious.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that we should celebrate the things in his life worth celebrating. And I think that there are a lot of things worth celebrating. And we shouldn't be blinded to any of that. And we should be willing to say, but I disagree. We have a different vision of what being a follower of Jesus is. And you say it should look like this, we should look like that. It's okay to disagree. But we shouldn't let those disagreements cloud us to the things that we would want to celebrate. This is a brother. He loved Jesus. Man, great. I love this. So let's talk about what that looks like. And we can have a loving disagreement, shake hands, hug each other, and all that at the end. And so I think love helps us to see people in their totality. We see the good, we see the bad, and we don't try to hide or cover over them or cause one of them to live in the shadow of the other, but to see people as they truly are.
Yeah. Anyone who has read any of my books knows that a major theme and calling of my scholarly work not necessarily, what I've been asked to teach in the classroom, but my dissertation topic, my emphasis is like trying to get right how the scriptures call the church to relate to the world. And a big part of my convictions about that biblical worldview is that the fusion of church and state and those strategic partnerships, I think, do more harm to the Christian faith than good. And so there's a big part of that. But Charlie didn't view things that way, and he's probably with the majority of evangelical Christians, and I would say even non-evangelical Christians, who do believe that the church should do everything to be positive and making a difference in the world and making it better, and so they should infiltrate political structures and have an over influence on political processes. Like I'm in a different position than that, and so. But the question for me is not that. It's not a question. The command of me is to love him and to think the best of him. And, when he defends Christian faith and Christian values, there are a lot of times like, amen, well said. That's a great argument. Like, there are a lot of things that he is about that as a fellow believer, man, I would say probably 80% there's good overlap. And the 20% is a pretty strong 20% given my calling as a scholar. But my calling as a Christian is not to let that 20% difference define how I feel about him while he's living and now that he's dead. And, and it's not just this thing that, I guess, they will know we are Christians by our love. The they is the unbelieving world.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this moment, it's not just important that you know in your heart that you love him because he's a Christian brother. And then conversely, think about there are versions of him on both sides of the aisle who are believers. Do you truly love them while they're alive? And do you truly love them when they've died? That should be evident. My love for him should be evident to unbelievers right now as a sign that Jesus breaks down walls that are very high and mighty in the world. And so when an unbeliever encounters Christians during this, they should see love. And they see it most from the people who disagree the most with Charlie Kirk. The more you disagree with him and what he stood for and what his mission was with this, American Christianity version, right? Like the more you disagree with him, the more opportunity you have to be a witness to the love of Jesus. And so the challenge is, and Jesus was very clear, like everyone loves those who love them. Everyone's going to love the people who like put out the videos that you love and you agree with the more you agree with them, the more they agree with you, the more you naturally love them. And even the pagans do that. It's the ones who disagree with Charlie the most. That's where the greatest potential is for the love of Christ to truly shine right now. And so the more of a hater you are, the more we need you right now. Because your witness right now is stronger than anyone else's. And so that's a challenge and an invitation.
Great point. Great place to, I think, wrap up this podcast because we're over time, but I think this is a good conversation to have. So I really appreciate that final point. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us in this episode of the After Class podcast. After class, because
the best conversations happen
after class.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the After Class podcast. ACP is hosted by Sam Long, John Nugent, and Ron Peters. Social media pictures and descriptions are provided by Darren Harris. Audio mixing and editing is done by Drew Nyquist. If you've enjoyed this episode of ACP, you might also enjoy GLCC's Master of Arts in Practical Theology degree. In this 36-hour program, you will receive first-rate biblical and theological instruction from John, Ron, Sam, and several of their colleagues at Great Lakes Christian College. To learn more about this program, visit glcc.edu. Get practical and go deep at GLCC.